Hi guys, I wanted to do an example presentation for you guys on Countee Cullen, the poet that I chose. This week, what you're focusing on is this, choosing your artist, doing the graphic organizer. This is my graphic organizer. So I just went through this and answered all of the questions that it had in there or put other facts that I thought were interesting or pertinent. Um, Remember to include your sources in the bibliography. It says you need a minimum of 3, and only one of those 3 sources can be Wikipedia. And notice I didn't just copy and paste a URL. I actually have the full works cited entry here in MLA format. If you're not sure how to do that, all you have to do is copy and paste the URL into a website like easybib.com, and it will generate a citation for you. So it's super easy. Make sure your works cited, or your bibliography, excuse me, is in this format. Okay, so I have this example if you want to take a look at it on Schoology in this week's folder. Now for my presentation on Countee Cullen. Excuse me. So Countee Cullen was a poet, novelist, a playwright, and a teacher. He didn't live very long. He died when he was 43. But he had a very prolific career and legacy. Early life and education. So he was born County Leroy Porter in 1903. His birthplace is unknown, but they think Kentucky. Apparently he was a very private person, so he kept a lot of the details of his life secret. He was raised by his paternal grandmother, who died when he was 15 years old. Excuse me, my computer's going to die, so I'm going to plug it in. At which point, he was taken in by the Reverend Frederick A. Cullen, who was a well-known and influential pastor in Harlem in New York City. They put him in school, and he edited the school newspaper and literary magazine in high school. He attended New York University. He graduated from there in 1925 and earned the Witter Binner Poetry Prize. Now, this isn't the first prize that he had been awarded for his poetry. He had won another prize early on in his life. He was a very popular and gifted poet. He released his first collection of poems the same year that he graduated, and then he went on to Harvard and graduated with a master's in 1926. His career. This is from one of the websites I used. I can't remember which, that's the author's last name. But they said by the time he earned his master's degree, he had become the most popular Black poet in America. Major literary magazines were regularly publishing his poems. He was influenced heavily by the British Romantic poets, specifically John Keats, who was his favorite. And he wrote his poems in the traditional European structure and verse. Unlike other Black poets at the time, like Langston Hughes, who were writing in free verse and not necessarily using rhyme or structure. Well, they were using structure, but not the traditional style. His poems, the content, the subject matter, I guess, were about African American racial origin and experience. He was successful with both Black and white audiences, and he also worked as a playwright and a French teacher for a while. He did release one novel in 1934 called One Way to Heaven, which received mixed reviews, but his poetry was very, very popular. His legacy, he has, along with all the awards he won in his lifetime, he has public schools named after him, and Harlem's 135th Street Branch Library is named after him. There's a picture of it. The poem that I chose is called Incident. And I chose it because it shows not only how powerful and hurtful words can be, but also how a single incident in your life, in your childhood, can be forever etched into your brain. This poem also seems to be a coming of age moment. The first stanza shows how he's happy, kind of naive and innocent, riding on this bus in Baltimore. And then by the third stanza, you know that this was an important moment in his life. This is maybe the first time he was exposed to racism. So I'm not going to read the whole poem, but again, the first stanza, he's riding on a bus in Baltimore. His heart is filled with glee, and he sees a boy looking at him. He smiles, but the boy sticks his tongue out and calls him the N-word. So in the last stanza, he says, I saw the whole of Baltimore from May until December. Of all the things that happened there, that's all that I remember. So he spent several months in the city, and this is the one thing that stands out in his memory of what happened there. So you know it had an impact on him. And again, maybe this was his first experience with racism, or at least a really important one. Harlem Renaissance link. So what does he have to do with the Harlem Renaissance? A lot. According to biography.com, he was seen as a leading light in the Harlem Renaissance. So not only was he one of the most popular Black poets, he also won more awards than any other African American author at that time. He was romantically linked to Alan Locke, who is actually considered the father of the Harlem Renaissance. He's the one that wrote the New Negro movement that was very influential at the time. He also married the daughter of another prominent figure in the Harlem Renaissance, the daughter of W.E.B. Du Bois. Even though their marriage lasted only a year, the wedding was a major social event in Harlem at the time. This is a picture from the wedding. She had something like 18 bridesmaids, and he had a bunch of groomsmen, and it was just this huge social event in Harlem. One of his aims was to write good traditional poetry to show whites that Blacks could write as well as anyone else, which seems very obvious to us now, but maybe not so much at the time. He was educated in like white schools. So even though he grew up in the Black community of Harlem, he was educated in a white setting. So I think this helped him, well, this is what the websites say, helped him be popular with both whites and Blacks, because he wrote in the traditional European style, but his subject matter was about the Black experience. Okay, here's my bibliography. Again, notice this is MLA formatted, not just a bunch of hyperlinks. And I have to keep this slide in here because I'm using this theme from SlidesGo, which is a really awesome place if you're looking for cool, aesthetically pleasing backgrounds. And that's it. Let me know if you have any questions.